I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1 panel. The proposition stands before us today offering a fundamentally flawed panacea. They look at a broken predatory Western model, specifically the United States, where 43 million citizens are collectively suffocating under a $1.7 trillion student debt crisis, and they invite us to celebrate its importation into Indonesia. They present this motion under the guise of benevolence, claiming it democratizes higher education. But we, on the opposition, see this policy for what it truly is, the dangerous infantilization of a fundamental human right. Hello everyone, I'm the first speaker from Team Opposition. My name is Milano Sebastian, and today we strongly oppose the motion this House would adopt student loan mechanism in Indonesia. Let us establish the first principles of today's debate. Education is not a luxury consumer good. It is not a smartphone or vehicle that an individual buys on credit card and pays off in installments. Education is a constitutional mandate, a public good, and the ultimate vehicle for social mobility under our constitution. The state is legally bound to allocate 20% of the APBN state budget to education. The moment a state adopts a student loan mechanism as a primary funding vehicle, it systematically abdicates that social contact. It shifts the financial risk of structural economic instability from the broad, capable shoulders of the state directly onto the fragile back of 18-year-old. We, on the opposition, refuse to weaponize that against the ambitions of our youth. Therefore, we stand in proud, unyielding opposition to this motion. Before I unpack our core substantive arguments, we must dissect the deep, irreconcilable friction between the proposition's idealized mechanism and the harsh, unyielding realities of the Indonesian socio-economic landscape. The proposition's case relies entirely on a westernized economic vacuum. They assume an airtight, transparent, formal job market where the fresh graduates instantly step into high-paying corporate roles with predictable salary trajectories. Let us inject some cold reality into this room. Over 60% of Indonesia's workforce is trapped within the informal economy. Our nation is currently battling a severe youth underemployment crisis. Tens of thousands of university graduates are underemployed, underpaid, or forced into volatile gig economy just to survive. They are working as ride-hailing drivers, freelance workers, or entering entry-level positions that pay bare minimum wage with zero job security. To introduce a compounding financial stability and debt into the lives of young adults navigating an economy that cannot even guarantee them a stable living wage is not an opportunity. It is systemic exploitation. It is a policy that treats our youth as financial collateral for banks and lenders. Before I begin my arguments, I would like to rebuke the first speaker from the team proposition. They claim student loans solve the missing middle problem and increase university enrollment. Their logic: the poor get grants, the rich pay upfront, but the middle class is left out because university tuition keeps rising. Loans give this middle class the buying power to go to university. The proposition assumes a university degree guarantee a high-paying formal employment in Indonesia. The reality is a massive youth underemployment crisis. Fresh graduates are increasingly trapped in low-paying gig work or informal jobs. Middle-class Indonesian families are highly risk-averse regarding debt, forcing them to take on millions of rupiah in debt with zero guarantee of a stable return. Doesn't expand access. It causes families to opt out of education entirely to avoid financial ruin. We will use an income contingent repayment system, so it's perfectly safe, they said. Students will only pay back the loan after they graduate and only if their salary passes a certain high income threshold. This is completely blind to the Indonesian structural reality. Over 60%, as I said, of Indonesia's workforce operates in the informal economy, unlike the US or the UK. We do not have a centralized airtight tax and credit tracking system that can monitor everyone's actual monthly income. It is incredibly easy for graduates to underreport income, work cash in hand, or enter the informal sector to evade repayment. This means default rates will skyrocket, turning the loan program into a massive black hole of non-performing loans that the government will eventually have to bail out using the APBN anyway. So let me begin my actual argument. My first substantive argument addresses how this policy completely backfires, actively shutting the door on the very marginalized communities it claims to salvage. The proposition argues that student loans will bridge the gap for low-income and missing middle families who struggle to pay rising university tuition. However, their economic calculus completely ignores a profound sociology reality, the deep-seated phenomenon of debt aversion in Indonesian households. In a developing country like Indonesia, debt is not viewed as a casual corporate strategy. It is viewed as an existential threat to family survival. For a lower middle class family in Jakarta or a farming family in rural regions, thinking of tens of millions of rupiah in debt means risking the foreclosure of their ancestral land, the loss of their home, and the absolute destruction of their fragile financial safety net. When you establish student loans as the definite pathway, higher education's underprivileged students do not see a golden ticket. They see an economic trap. They look at the volatile job market, they look at the compounding interest, they make the entirely rational decisions to opt out of higher education entirely, rather than gamble their family's survival on a debt slip. What is the ultimate impact? Instead of creating equity, student loans institutionalize a permanent class divide. Wealthy elites will continue to graduate debt free and immensely invest their earnings, while the poor are either locked out of universities entirely or enters the workforce with a financial noose tightly around their necks. Moving to our second and final argument, with the broader macroeconomic death sentence this policy inflicts upon our national future, Indonesia is currently at a critical historical juncture, banking on heavily on our demographic dividend to achieve the vision of Indonesia Emas 2045. We need a young workforce that is highly productive, highly entrepreneurial, and capable of driving aggressive economic growth. But what happens when you shackle this exact generation with debt the moment they turn 22? You completely paralyze the purchasing power and economic mobility of the young middle class. When a fresh graduate faces aggressive automated deductions from their meager UMR salary to service loan principal and interest, their disposable income drops to near zero. They cannot save capital, they cannot purchase property, delaying the housing market. Catastrophically, they cannot afford to take entrepreneurial risk. They cannot start small businesses, launch tech startups, or invest in local micro enterprises because their credit histories are tied up and any potential failure means absolute bankruptcy. Furthermore, our state lacks the robust tracking infrastructure required to even monitor and collect these debts efficiently in an informal economy, meaning default rates will skyrocket, the state will be left a holding mountain of non-performing loans, forcing a massive state bailout using the APBN anyway. By adopting this motion, this the proposition turns out greatest economic asset our youth into a generational liability. The proposition will stand up and next and demand if we do not use our loans, how do we solve the budget limitations of our universities? We tell them clearly, you subsidize the supply side. You do not penalize the demand side. Instead of building a massive, expensive, bureaucratic collection machine that hunts down struggling graduates, the state must rigorously optimize and defend the 20% education mandate within the APBN. We must halt the aggressive commercialization of state universities and implement strictly legally binding caps on UKT brackets across the nation. Furthermore, we must expand and restructure our existing KIP Kuliah framework into a tiered progressive grant system that shields the middle class from financial ruin. The state must view education funding as a long-term capital investment that yields returns through future corporate and personal income taxes, not as a short-term loan that needs to be extracted from fresh graduates. Let us protect our students, safeguard our economy, and preserve the integrity of our education system. And that is why in this debate, Team Opposition wins and proud to oppose. Thank you very much.